And how people can build a tolerance, particularly to opiates, relatively quickly, right? People build a tolerance, right? And you define, and you're not a toxicologist, correct?
No, sir, no.
Okay. But you have some general familiarity based on your experience as an emergency room doctor.
Good evening, everyone.
And when someone stops using a controlled substance,
it's about 6:05, and as people continue to come in, we want to continue to just play the music. We are super excited to have this conversation, moving beyond parole and probation. Again, we're going to ask everybody to mute themselves. I want to take this time now. It's 6:06. I like to honor people and their time. So it's about 6:06. And I want to thank everyone for joining in on this conversation. Again, moving beyond probation and parole, what's keeping you stuck. I want to say thank you to everyone who supported and, planned to make sure the event happens. I do want to say that the conversation is being recorded. So we just want to be transparent about that. So people that couldn't join today, they could, gain some of the information at a later date. So I do want to make that disclaimer now. I want to thank also the SWAG team, which is the formerly incarcerated women of Why Not Prosper, who supports and helped plan this event along with the students at Penn, and we'll do thank yous at the end for all the speakers and the moderator. So at this time, with no further ado, I want to introduce to everyone our moderator for the evening. All right, and I want to introduce Mr. Eric Marsh. Eric Marsh is born and raised in Philadelphia. He's been working in our community for over 2 decades. He's monitored or moderated several events over the years and different conversations with Word and 103.9. He's also a commissioner on the Mayor's Commission on African American Males. He also works down and is the president of the Nicetown CDC Neighborhood Advisory Subcouncil. And we are so pleased and honored to have Mr. Eric be our moderator for tonight. And with that, I'm going to put it into his hands and say, welcome, welcome, welcome. Eric.
Well, thank you, Reverend Michelle, and to everyone else here. It is a huge honor to be part of this event tonight. I just want to say, it's a pleasure. Reverend Michelle and I also sit on the MacArthur Foundation Community Advisory Committee that's working diligently to decarcerate Pennsylvania, and the hard work that she has been doing both with her ministry, her nonprofit, and also the work on the CAC is greatly appreciated. So I wanted to thank you for that and all the things you've done. So, and also thank the panelists who are going to join us tonight. We're here for an exciting an engaging conversation about probation and parole and all the things that come with it. You're going to hear some powerful stories tonight from people with lived experience who've been caught up in the system and who are also fighting to dismantle that system. So what I'm going to do, each of our panelists, you have about 5 minutes. I'm going to call your name. You're going to introduce yourselves. You're going to tell us a little bit about your work and your background and what makes you qualified to sit here on this panel and tell us about, your advocacy and your experience. All right? So without any further ado, let's start off. I'd like to start off with our first panelist, Secretary Brandon Flood. Secretary Flood is the Secretary of the Pennsylvania Board of Pardons. Secretary Flood, please introduce yourself and tell us about yourself.
Hey, thank you, Eric. So my name is Brandon Flood. I serve as the Secretary of the Pennsylvania Board of Pardons. I was appointed to this post. Actually, today is my anniversary date, my 2nd year in this post. Was appointed by the Lieutenant Governor 2 years ago, John Fetterman. For those of you that aren't familiar with me, I've worked in state government over the last decade, a number of different, in different capacities. About 7 years with the House of Representatives, different capacities, mostly research and policy development. Also had a brief stint with the Service Employees International Union, serving as their alleged director for the state. Also previously served as the chief lobbyist for the Pennsylvania NAACP. And then prior to this post, I served alongside Deputy Secretary Carrie Kirkland, who oversees the Bureau of Diversity, Inclusion, Small Business Opportunities with the Department of General Services. I served as their policy and reporting specialist. So, my background is, at least from a professional sense, is policy development. But also, for those of you who are familiar with me, I also have that lived experience too. I also served 9 years collectively in the Department of Corrections that preceded my professional career. So part of the reason why I was appointed to this post is I also was formerly a recipient of a pardon. The governor issued me a pardon March of 2019, which set the table for me to be able to take over this post and to have the distinction of being the first convicted felon to oversee a criminal justice agency. So, over the course of those 2 years, we've made a tremendous number of changes to the executive clemency process. The Board of Pardons has been in existence for almost 150 years. So a lot of the stuff that a lot of the reforms that we're making is because, a lot of the things that we do is, to be perfectly frank, it's antiquated. So being able to kind of dismantle the culture of the past, and there's a 5-member board that I report to, so I can't just make changes unilaterally. It takes that compromise between my board and myself, and obviously our stakeholders, probation, parole, DOC. So the main thrust of what my job is to do is to modernize what executive clemency looks like in Pennsylvania. Obviously, being a recipient of a pardon myself, my goal is also to make sure that I pay it forward so that more deserving Pennsylvanians get to avail themselves of the same chance that I was able to avail myself of. But also, on the commutation side, ensuring that those that have been sentenced unfairly, wrongly, and excessively, that they do get a chance that they are afforded a second chance. So, we work very the Lieutenant Governor, that's his, he'll tell you flat out, his job is to commute as many deserving lifers as possible. And we have about less than a 2-year window here to do that, at least with this administration. So look forward to working with everyone on this panel, those that are in attendance, to, again, further to make this process more efficient, modernize, but more importantly, to make sure that more deserving Pennsylvanians can take advantage of it. So that's my spiel.
Excellent. Well, Secretary Flood, appreciate that. Thank you so much. The next person we're going to go to is Ramona Harris. Ramona is the Vice President of Unincarcerated Minds Incorporated. Ramona, unmute yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do with Unincarcerated Minds.
I'm Ramona Harris. I am the Vice President of Unincarcerated Minds, and we provide job opportunities, food, vocational training. There are various resources that we provide for returning citizens as well as members of marginalized communities that have been impacted by mass incarceration. You guys have to forgive me, I'm a little nervous. This is my first time on a large platform like this. But we've been doing that for over a year. We really got moving when the pandemic began because our main program is the Feed the People program, where we feed at least 1,000 families on a weekly basis. We bring 10,000 pounds of food into the communities and we give it out in various parts of the city of Philadelphia as well as Montgomery County. My advocacy work with parole and probation started with my husband. Everybody knows basically Bobby is my husband, and he had a little run-in with his parole agent's supervisor. Thus began my voice with parole and probation situations. I feel that there is a definite need for change, and especially my position has always been, if someone has served their time, they don't need to be tailed for the rest of their life. My husband is on lifetime parole. And I think that, he spent 29 years in prison since he was 15. He was rehabilitated enough to send him home So why would he not, why does he need a tail for the rest of his life?
Mhm.
As well as other people as well. There are a number of people that I've met that are on federal, state, or federal and state parole. So there's a definite need for change, and I would like for my voice to be heard in that area.
Excellent. Well, Ramona, I just want to say that, you know, despite what it looks like, it may look like a large platform, but you're with family here, right?
Yay.
So this is a comfortable conversation, and feel free to relax, and speak freely, right? Because this is what it is. We want to hear the real voices and the real stories of folks who are dealing with the system, so that we can better understand how to dismantle it and make it more equitable, right? And so, with that, I want to introduce the man you just spoke of, my brother, Bobby Harris. Bobby is a social justice advocate and community organizer for Dignity Empowered Now. He's also the president of the Life Association. And as Ramona mentioned, he is the founder of Unincarcerated Minds Incorporated. Bobby Harris.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure always to see you, brother Eric. My story, like Brandon had shared, Secretary Brandon shared, I'm directly impacted. There's another name to me, and that name is BI 6726. That's an institutional name. And that name came about when I went into the prison at the age of 15 and sentenced to a life sentence in prison without the possibility of parole. Upon me being resentenced underneath of the juvenile or the law of the United States Supreme Court ruling that it was unconstitutional to sentence a juvenile lifer to life without the possibility of parole, I was paroled in 2017, and I had to learn a new way of living life out here. And I chose my life moving in the areas with other people of like minds, fighting criminal justice, system that's in existence to bring about reform, or in most cases, I like to say, the dismantlement of it that harms the Black and Brown community. I'm currently working for Dignity and Power as well, which is an abolitionist organization bringing about community reinvestment, alternatives to incarceration. And as you mentioned, I am the founder and president of Unincarcerated Minds. The name of it came from me living in prison. I chose to refuse to believe that I had a incarcerated mindset to live and die in the penitentiary. So I fought for my liberty and I obtained it. And I fight with that today.
Beautiful. Thank you for that, Bobby. I really appreciate that. Our next panelist and guest is Mr. Vince Motto. Vince is a paralegal and associate member of the Bar Association of Pennsylvania. Vince, tell the people about yourselves and a little bit about what brings you here tonight.
Well, I go back a little further than you guys. I'm a little older than all of these. I go back many years. I started with the probation department drug program. I was director of admissions for 8 years, called Genesis 2. I don't know if you guys remember that. It used to be on Broad and Girard. I started with them, and I was going to school for Temple for law in the meantime. Anyway, I worked on a lot of cases, a lot of RICO cases, always for the defense, not the prosecution. A lot of RICO cases. I was successful with getting a guy out with a presidential pardon a few years ago. And I was recently successful with a juvenile, getting him home to his mom where he belonged. Right now I do kind of semi-retired, but I still do a lot of termination cases, probation termination, termination of fines, prison shifts. If you want to move, guys want to get moved closer to home to be with their family, I help with that. Law to me is more than a job. It's a passion. I believe there's an opening for everybody. I do a lot of post-conviction work, after conviction. I believe there's an opening in everyone's case. If you just take the time and look and read and study, I think we could be more successful getting justice to some people. But basically, that's what it's all about. And I'm certified as a drug and alcohol counselor. I was one of the first certified back in the early 80s, late 70s. And now that I have time on my hands, I like to get back into that, help these kids on drugs. Basically, that's about it.
Thank you, Vince. Mhm.
Thank you so much, Vince. And yeah, we're not going to compare age, but I see you've been at this work for quite a while, and it's greatly appreciated. Our next guest and our final panelist is Ronald Cui. Ronald is the special advisor to the Empowerment Center USA Incorporated, a tax-exempt nonprofit organization. And beyond that, he has done a host of things in the community, a long list of accolades, including working with Mayor Good and Pepsi and a few other things. So I'm going to let Ronald tell us a little bit about himself. Ronald, and take yourself off of mute when you get a chance. You're on mute. Ronald, you're on mute.
And as you
There
now
you go.
know, I am not an engineer and I failed math. I wasn't good at math. English was my strong point.
That's all
But at
right.
any rate, thank you, and I apologize for that this step there. But I just wanted to just thank God for being part of this panel. I want to thank Reverend Michelle, all of you panelists, and such an esteemed group of people and accomplished. But as for myself, I moved to Philly here from Miami back in '85 in corporate America. I stayed in corporate America until '89, until I was recruited to the city of Philadelphia, where I became deputy managing director, held positions under a couple of other administrations, namely not only Good, but Ed Rendell and then Mike Nutter. But in between there, I wound up, I had a business doing international trade with West and Southern Africa. We did some great things, great accomplishments. But I wound up, with substance abuse out in the streets, and they ate me alive and spit me up. And in the process, I caught a case of violent crime and did 6 years, Department of Corrections. When I came out, I was determined that there was some things that I now knew as having been a public administrator at a fairly high level, and been a corporate executive at a fairly high level of PepsiCo. And I said, I got to put these things to talent now, because now that I've been incarcerated, now my work really is going to begin now that I've been released. And I found it's a very tough road to hoe. I was appointed director of reentry for the city in 2008. And that was an interesting journey, because I found out people really just did not get it. They did not get it. It was a revenue stream for a lot of organizations. There just were not a lot of organizations, and I'm not just saying this because we're on her town hall, but there's not a lot of organizations out there that I found like Reverend Michelle's who are heartfelt. They're not in it for the money. They're in it to make a difference. Of course, you get paid for your services. You need money to do things. So I really am just blessed to be here, to have an opportunity through my organization that my wife founded and is the CEO, called the Empowerment Center USA. And we basically deal with legal financial obligations, the fines, fees, and costs. We follow the money, and that's what we intend to do on a scale basis in the coming years. So I'll leave it there, and then I guess we'll get a little bit more into the detail as we complete the town hall. So good to be here. Thank you, Eric.
Well, Ron, thank you. And thank you for the work that you've done. I also understand that you have a video. There's a video that we want to play that tells a little bit more information. So we're going to turn it over to Justin and Jennifer so that they can play the video for our audience. And then we're going to come back and do a poll question.
Great.
Hello, everybody.
I need your attention on an important workshop called Prison Debt Solutions. you, a loved one, or someone you just know and care about is facing debt that they can't pay to the criminal justice system, you need to attend Prison Debt Solutions. I need your attention on an important workshop called Prison Debt Solutions. If you, a loved one, or someone you just know and care about is facing debt that they can't pay to the criminal justice system, you need to attend the Prison Debt Solutions workshop. You'll receive legal solutions to put a halt to the criminalization of debt in your life or the life of loved ones. This workshop will deliver on how to drastically reduce fines, fees, restitution, and court costs that keep you from moving forward after having run-ins with the criminal justice system. Now consider these facts. Many courts routinely impose fines, fees, restitution, and court costs without even considering whether a person is able to pay them, and that is contrary to state law. This criminal justice debt can amount to a lifetime sentence. Secondly, people who are unable to pay can end up behind bars as a result of procedures that violate their rights. And the threat of incarceration forces poor people to choose between meeting their most basic needs and paying for these legal financial obligations, or as they're known, LFOs. The Prison Debt Solutions Workshop will help you learn the secrets, the ins and outs of criminal justice debt. Prison Debt Solutions Workshop will provide you with the legal statutes, how to fill out the necessary forms, how to file them, when and where to file them in court, and who to talk to and what to say when you talk to them. And when you leave Prison Debt Solutions Workshop, you'll know how to represent yourself in court, understand diversionary programs, and how to get costs waived after sentencing. You'll receive this and more. Now go to our website. You don't want to miss this opportunity to take control of your freedom. We'll see you there.
Excellent.
Very nice.
That was nice. That was really nice and really informative as well. I really appreciate the fact that this information and these resources are out here. I mean, it's not enough resources like this being made available or being shared with the community. So that's another reason why we want to take the opportunity to play the video. But also at the same time, part of what we're doing tonight is to get feedback and input from all of you who are watching and you are here today. We want to submit a couple of poll questions to you all and have you answer them while we're having our conversation. And these poll questions are specific to anyone who is either on probation or parole or who has a family member who's on probation and parole. And so your answers to these questions are then going to go into a document that's going to help frame policy suggestions and recommendations. So we really want you to take the time to fill out these questions. It's very quick. We're going to be able to do it within the chat. And so let's get started with the first poll question. Are you on probation or parole at this time? Or do you have a family member on probation or parole? Yes or no? If you can, if you don't see the poll popping up on your screen, you can also put the answer in the chat. As of right now, it's pretty split, 50-50, and it's leaning a more 60-40 towards no. But again, we all know that mass incarceration and criminal justice system has run rampant through our communities. And so the more folks that we can get on these calls, the more folks that we can give feedback to these questions is really going to make a powerful impact on the work that we're doing. And so far we have 29 out of 37 participants answered. So about 78% people have answered the question. And it looks like 62% of us who are here are not or have no family members on probation and parole. But again, those with lived experiences, your answers to these polls are extremely valuable. So we look forward to you filling those out. 30 out of 37 so far.
And I think us as panelists, Eric will not be able to answer the poll question. So you always going to have the 7 of us. I don't know if we're able to answer.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, thank you for pointing that out, Reverend Michelle. I was just trying to figure out why I couldn't answer this question. But so yes, those of us who are part of the discussion, we're going to be talking about this and answering it. And so just any of the panelists who are here, I know Bobby, you already mentioned that was part of your experience. Secretary, that was something that you had experienced. Anyone want to chime in on that while we're waiting for the last few answers to come in?
Eric, I'll go ahead and chime in. It's
Sure.
just probably one of the more disruptive processes that could be imposed. When I was locked up, I used to hear guys who'd been doing time for, you know, double-digit years and so forth, and they were saying, I'm gonna you know, max out. I'm not going out on parole. I'm not going. I was thinking to myself, my goodness, you've been here for 15 years. Why don't you want to leave? But I came to understand why the onerous responsibilities and requirements that are placed are enough to cause the type of recidivism rates that we see. So I'm not suggesting that you know, that was a pervasive attitude. But every time I saw it, I didn't understand it until I was on parole. Then it was very clear then why people said that. I never got written up while I was locked up in 6 years. During my time at the halfway house, I was written up 6 or 8 times. Same me. You know.
May I add something, Brother Eric, regarding that?
Go ahead, Bob.
I do believe that's a good indicator for us all, not just the panelists, but for each one of the participants that's viewing this. That's an indicator that we're not present. The question should always be why. Some have no faith in the parole or the probation system, then some don't have the information or the education to come out and inspire the movement to define and say enough while living underneath a probation or parole. So although we don't have that many on there, I myself represent every last one of them in the state of Pennsylvania. So we are here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. We all represent someone. And I hate to use a cliche, like the voice of the voiceless, because everyone has a voice, but the reality is they just can't get to the mic right now. And so we are representing those. And just so as we hear with the poll, I think we've actually got 86% of the people have responded so far, 33 out of the 38 who can access the poll. And about 40% of those individuals are on probation or parole or have a loved one or family member on probation or parole. So yeah, I think we're good with that. If we can now move on to the questions for the panelists, and we're going to come back with a few more poll questions for those of you who are here with us. I think I'm going to share results. And you guys let me know if you want to, if you're going to, Justin, you let me know if you're ready to close this poll out or if you want me to do it.
I can go ahead and do it.
All right. All right, so we're going to start with our questions for the panelists, and we're going to start with Secretary Flood with our first question. Secretary Flood, is it possible for people to apply or be granted early termination off of parole? And what does that process look like?
Yes, that's a great question. And yes, that is a possibility. On our application, we do have as a clemency type listed commute parole or commute maximum sentence. So that is something that has always been something that has always been a process that it has existed. Now, the only difficulty with that, and one of the things that we're actively working on and quite successfully, is probation and parole. It really doesn't carry any weight for an applicant to put that in, to put in for clemency to commute their parole if probation and parole isn't willing to weigh in on whether or not this person is deserving. So historically, probation and parole they haven't taken positions, and whether it was just because they were disinclined to do so or they weren't asked to do so. But the challenge that I posed to probation and parole is I said, who better to tell us who should be having their sentence commuted than the very people that have the care and custody and supervision, which is you guys, right? So Director Christian Stevens, who is the Director of Probation and Parole Services for Eastern Pennsylvania, he agreed with me. So now Probation and Parole, they're actively weighing in and actually are supporting applicants. I can't say that that has happened yet, but there are a few in the queue where they are applicants that are asking to commute the remainder of their parole. So we'll see how that works out. But again, we were able to make some headway in at least getting the Board of Probation and Parole to actually weigh in on these cases.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. Well, we're going to come back around and ask you another question, but we're going to go to the next question for our next panelist, and that is Vince Motto. And the question is, Vince, is it possible for people to apply or be granted early termination? Wait a minute. That's the same question. It's the same question. Is it possible for people to apply or be granted early termination off of parole? And what does that look like to you?
Absolutely. In fact, federal law dictates that after 1 year, you're entitled to put a request in for termination. Most of my work, as I said, 90% is in the federal courts. But I also do terminations at state courts also. But you have a right after 1 year to put it in. I mean, you're going to get it, but there's a lot of factors are involved. A lot of factors.
Do you?
For instance,
go ahead.
Should I finish?
Yeah,
I was
please.
wondering, Vince, what factors what will he say for people?
That's what I was going to ask him.
The factors are this: the original severity of the offense, number one, the defendant's criminal history, how well the defendant did while on probation. The recommendation of the probation department carries a lot of weight. If you get that recommendation from the probation officer, you got a very good chance of getting it done. Sometimes I get a defendant evaluated to show that he's not a threat to the future from getting arrested again. But they're the factors that you look at. You want to, and also the prosecuting attorney, you want to get his recommendation or her recommendation. And if you achieve that, chances are you got it done. There's a lot of other things too. You while incarcerated, you want to do well. Don't get write-ups. Don't get in trouble in the institution. You want a letter of recommendation, if possible, from the guard that you work for. There's a lot to it. There's a lot to it. But I've been very successful with it, especially in the federal courts.
How do inmates and people who are incarcerated actually get that information? Are they made aware up front about the 1 year limit and all of those different cues and tips, or is that something you kind of have to learn?
They go down to law library, you do reading, the lawyer, talk to their lawyers. But after a year in the federal system, you have a right to request.
Okay. All right. We'll come back and follow up on that and a few other questions. I want to go to Ramona next. Ramona, the question we have for you is, what would you like to tell the parole board as it relates to being married to someone who is spending their life on parole? How has that impacted you and your family?
Well, the only thing that I can do is paint a picture of it for everybody that doesn't know. Bobby's on lifetime parole, and that means the whole household is on parole. We can't just up and do things like anyone else. We have to ask for permission to go to another state, to ask for permission to go to actually another county. Can't just up and decide to go on a trip. Everything is based on permission. Even when someone is paroled to your residence, that gives the parole agent and their superiors the right to come to your home at any time, any given time they want to, morning, noon, or night. If you have a pet, if you have a dog, and a lot of people are animal lovers, if they don't like that specific dog breed, they can say that the dog has to go.
Wow.
you know, most people, there are a lot of people that are gun owners or, you know, advocate for having guns. We can't do that in here because Bobby has a, you know, he's on parole.
Mhm.
And, you know, just any time that if there's any kind of altercation in the area or even inside the home,
Mhm.
run-ins with the law, it could possibly send him back to prison for 5 years from the beginning. So it's very taxing. It's very traumatic for some, but that is the reality of someone that is on parole in the home.
Mm.
Everyone is on parole because we all have to be mindful of how we move to make sure that things aren't happening that's going to cause, you know, anything that's illegal could possibly bring attention to the residents and put him in a situation where he's going to be taken back. So it's, you know, is very taxing. It's very taxing on a family.
Yeah. Let me ask you another question, just about that process. When you say you have to ask for permission, what does that process look like, and how long can it take for them to get back in touch with you to even get an answer to your question?
Well, Bobby has a good communication system with his agent. He can text him, and a lot of times, as long as he knows where he's got the notification that he's wants to go somewhere, it's pretty much okay. We haven't run into that situation where an agent says, no, that I can recall offhand. Say, for instance, if we're going on a trip for a few days, he has to get permission from him where he has to send him a traveling paper. So that way he has it on his body at all times when we're out of town. So it's just pretty much making sure he has a good line of communication with his agent, but everyone doesn't.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. We have a few more questions, and before we get to the second round of questions, we're also going to go to questions from the audience and the other participants. So if you do have a question, please make sure to put it in the chat, and we'll get to it because we want to make sure that you are heard and that these panelists get a chance to share their knowledge and expertise. My next question is for Bobby. So Bobby, what's the #1 goal as it relates to parole and probation for yourself? What is the #1 goal that we want to see happen in relation to probation and parole?
That's a good question, bro, Eric. And I think it should be flipped the other way. What's the #1 goal for the probation and parole
Yeah, Bobby, come
to
on.
be put in place to help men and women make that transition into society in a meaningful way? You know, I think understanding, you know, when Vincent was speaking, I'm gonna go to this to bring it in line with the question, but the flip way that I'm presenting it, the #1 goal for the probation. He mentioned how prisoners inside of prisons, they can go up for commutation in the feds. In the states, it's a little bit harder. In the states, it's a lot more restriction. But I think one compelling piece that should always be amplified going forward, we should actually compel the parole board, the probation board. Why not submit individual names to the pardon board, as Brandon alluded to? Whereas though if you're presenting individuals that you know that are no longer a threat to society, one, they made parole. In order to meet the requirement to be released out of prison, you must not be perceived as a threat to society. You must have been rehabilitated to a level of acceptance that the parole board inside the prison voted yes, and then the parole board up in central office vote yes. So there's 2 checks and balance. Now, when them 2 checks and balance have approved an individual, male or female, to be released, why not take the assessment from the parole agent that works directly with that individual and make an assessment? Do we need to continue to spend $3,500 or more a year supervising an individual that's not doing any harm but doing productive things in the community and giving back and not re-offending to cause harm on our society. So that's one thing that we should say, what's the number one goal? To compel the parole board to start submitting names to the parole and probation board to consider commutation or pardons for individuals. As well, going back to the penitentiary, we have individuals up in there. They can go to the law library. However, those same individuals don't always have that assistance. A lot of our people are living inside the state penitentiary with low levels of education. So they don't have that readily available to them. So when there are agencies out here, those agencies should seek to assist them. But more importantly, you need something to present to the parole and or the probation board, the pardon board, that shows that you have done something worthwhile on the outside to be considered acceptable to be processed through the pardon process. Our individuals that sits in the penitentiary don't have anything other than the prison activity, which does carry weight. But those individuals aren't able to file something while they in there. They need to be out here. So we need to say moving beyond parole and probation, but we also need to say moving towards parole and probation acceptance for consideration for the individuals that's in the prison. So the number one goal that I believe is that these parole agents need to be able to make an assessment. They evaluate us. They know everything about us. I cannot contain my urine when they request it. That's readily available to them whenever they request it. I cannot contain my desires to travel, as my wife alluded to, without seeking their permission. And it can be accepted or it can be denied. However, these individuals know us. These individuals can make an assessment and attest to each individual living out here in society with these invisible shackles that we have on us. There's a lot of restraint. So let's say, what's the number one goal? We need to reform parole. We need to even say this. We must dismantle what exists and rebuild, because that system is oppressive. That system needs a lot of work. You can't take every boat of individuals in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, or any other county and say that these individuals represent the whole masses. Because when it comes to our society in Pennsylvania, it's Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Harrisburg. We're the ones that make it up. I mean, with the large number, as I'm reported to about. However, we have to take an approach that really say it's time that we use a system on what I'm going to say, the sunsetting.
Go ahead, Bobby.
Sunsetting of parole and probation in Pennsylvania. We need it from a legislative approach. We need it from a organizing position. So for all the advocacy individuals out there that's on this feed, I'm speaking to all of you as well as all of the elected officials out there that will see this. We need to sunset individuals up off of parole and probation. You all are aware of my situation. I'm a very bold speaker, but that's not to say it in a bad way. I'm a bold speaker because I learned how to live my life for something of value. But my boldness of speaking can also harm my life and bring restrictions or those invisible shackles being manifested into physical shackles, going back into the prison because I choose to speak for something right. There should not be a consequence for a man or woman that decide to do something to uplift his or her community and to be punished for such a behavior. It's not just that it's me, but that's the restraint and shackles that exist on everybody in the city of Philadelphia and across the state of Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
We
Bobby,
didn't happen to make up the numbers.
it sounds like that what you're saying.
To listen to us, and sunset legislation need to be passed.
It sounds like what you're saying is that the system is designed to keep you enslaved. I mean, incarcerated. You know what I'm saying. Right? It sounds like that what you're saying is that
Excellent pun.
once convicted, it's on the individual's shoulders to what's the phrase? Guilty until proven innocent when you're in these kind of situations, right? I'm gonna come back to you so we can follow up on that. But I want to go to Ron. Our next question is for Ron. Ron, since you specialize in fines and fees as well as the financial part of parole and probation, can you share one or two common myths that are related to the fines and fees and the financial aspect of parole and probation? What are the facts around that? What are some myths and what are some facts associated with fines and fees? And I can't see Ron, so
the most prominent.
I think your
Can you hear me
signal's
still?
going in and out. Try it again. All right, Ron, I can see you now. Try it again.
Okay.
There you go. All right,
All
great.
righty now. There we go. Technology. We're under the thought, more than the thought, we're under the practice that these individuals, we call judges, who reside over cases of sentencing, which includes fines, fees, and costs sometimes. But we're under the impression that they are the president of that courtroom, and they're not. But in practice, that's kind of the way it works. And the reason I say that is because there are procedures in place as we speak that have been in place that require certain procedures be executed to determine what fines, fees, and costs there are. Now, the bedrock case at the federal level was in 1983. That's how far back we're talking now on this issue in terms of case law. And it happened before that, but the most established case law by the Supreme Court, Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, it was 5-4 that you could not, it was absolutely against the laws of this country from the Supreme Court, incarcerate someone for not having the ability to pay. In other words, being broke, being poor. That's called debtor's prison. This country learned that from England in the 1700s, and it still exists today. So the fact that there's not rules and laws that must be followed is probably the biggest is the biggest myth, because people don't know that they have a choice. I think Vince said it earlier. There's choices, there's options, but you need to understand what your rights are. And your rights should not be denied because of your bank account or lack thereof. And that's what's happening out here in a major way, is that people don't know their rights, and then their rights are that they are entitled to an ability to pay hearing. And unless they willfully say, I'm not pay, I got the money, I got plenty, man, I'm not giving you nothing. Unless you do that, you cannot be sent back to jail by law. And what happens is most of the time, the public defenders, their caseloads are so enormous, well-meaning people, skilled people, but they don't have time to fight all of these things. So if you look at the data will demonstrate that those with private counsel are able to have these fines and fees reduced, waived, or completely eliminated. Now, let me just say this too, because I think it is a myth that the legislators don't have the say on this, that this just a court issue. It's not. Because in the state of Washington, fines, fees, and costs have been, they wiped the books clean. They took the balance, the outstanding balance, of which, by the way, another part of the myth is that these dollars are collected, they're charged and they're collected. Only 26% of $50 billion in outstanding debt has been collected. I'm gonna say that again. This money is uncollectible. 75% of these dollars are uncollectible. But people still stay under the gun, under the system, under parole, under restriction, under supervision for money they can't afford to pay. So these state of Washington, the city of San Francisco, and I got to bring it home even here. Larry Krasner, the district attorney here, made a policy decision in July of 2019 that this whole issue of fines and fees was not going to be held over people's heads in terms of their freedom. And that was here. But guess what? It wasn't on the front page or even the middle page of the Inquirer. It wasn't in the Daily News. It was in a publication called The Village Voice, and it had a little teeny story in there.
Wow.
See, that's a huge deal, but nobody knows about it. The
Yeah.
people who need to know, the Harvards, the university systems, the Brennan School of Law in New York University, they all know about it and they fight for it. But the people who need to know, who are the people who are the consumers of this system, do not know. That's what the Empowerment Center is about. We're getting ready to start a movement, bottom line.
Yeah.
I got a quick question. Eric, can
I jump in?
I see everybody trying to jump in on that one. Real
No,
quick, first, I know Bobby had his hand up. He wanted to respond to that, and then Reverend Michelle, and then Vince.
All right, go ahead.
Just to amplify what Brother Ron was just speaking on.
Okay.
As an individual that's on parole, you must pay those fines. I must pay for the rest of my life until I die $30 to my parole agent a month out of my paycheck. If I fail to do such, if I have work to do in Montgomery County, or if I have work to do in Harrisburg, I have to seek a traveling pass. If I want to go do that work, which all my traveling consists of, they will actually inform me, you cannot go nowhere till you pay us our money.
That's a shame.
Keep in mind that I have to pay them to supervise me and give them $30 out of my paycheck every month. And if I fail to do that, they will deny me from traveling anywhere I want to go, whether it's vacation or it's work. That is harmful.
Yeah, that's definitely a crime against those already convicted. Reverend Michelle, you said you had a question.
Yeah, I got a couple questions and a couple comments. So first of all, the scripture is coming to my mind that says, our people perish, or my people perish for the lack of knowledge. And that was the intention for having this town hall, right? To gather some information, to educate ourselves and our population. I feel like that's number one thing that we have to do as formerly incarcerated and convicted people, is we got to educate ourselves on our situations, and we got to know the do's and the don'ts. That's why I like Ron and everybody on the panel, basically, because I think that once we get education, then we have to respond with action. But my question goes to the secretary, as it relates to parole and probation. Somewhere I just heard that they are like putting a halt on people that's trying to apply for a pardon or parole or probation as it relates to fees and fines. Could you clear up any myths, or tell us exactly what is going on with fines or fees as it relates to probation? Or am I hearing it wrong, or what did I hear?
Eric, you fine with me addressing this, or you want to?
Yeah, no, feel free.
Okay.
He wants to address it.
Yeah, no. So to clarify things, our board, again, like I can't do a lot of things unilaterally. A lot of times I have to be able to build consensus with my 5-member board. Our board has taken it's kind of pivoted in the wrong direction, I would say, at least as it relates to fines, costs, and restitution. So it's not that you can't apply having outstanding fines, costs, and restitution, but they would like for that to be that outstanding debt to be resolved by the time you're scheduled for a hearing. I can't, per our regulations, even though I may have been told not to schedule someone for a hearing because they owe outstanding fines and costs, per my regulations, I still have to schedule them, whether they have it or not, and I will continue to do so. But what I will do is try to inform applicants on the front end what the expectation is. As was mentioned from one of the panelists, sometimes the resolution isn't always that you have to extinguish the debt in its entirety. There are opportunities to get the fines and costs waived, or be able to provide community service in lieu of costs. So yeah, I just want to clarify, you can apply with having outstanding fines and costs. However, if you are scheduled for a hearing and you still have those outstanding fines and costs, it will have an adverse effect. But I think one of the beauties of this town hall tonight is connecting us all together. You know, one of the things I tell applicants is I will gladly try to negotiate with your county to either waive the fees or be able to provide community service in lieu of that. Or in many instances, even if the clerk of courts is willing to say, hey, this person may still owe fines and costs, but we still don't believe that this should stand in the way of them receiving clemency. Those are things that I try to get the clerk of court to do to be able to counteract that whole issue of not having those outstanding fines and costs. So yeah, there are ways around it, and I think part of this town hall will be able to find some more solutions to resolve those issues, especially when people owe a considerable amount that where they even if they had a payment plan, they realistically would not be able to pay off $70,000, $100,000.
Thank you for that. I want to, I know Vince, I said we was going to go to you, but I want to be mindful of the time and also mindful of the fact that we have quite a few questions in the chat as well. And we have 2 more poll questions that we want to get to. So we did have that. Reverend Michelle, thank you for that question, because that was one of the questions that I was actually going to ask moving forward. But I know Jennifer has been monitoring the chat and looking at some of the questions that you all have been putting there. Jennifer, any questions that you want to pose to the panelists?
Yes. So our first question is from Yvette Brown, and she has a father who is sentenced of life without parole. His desire is to get paroled, and she was wondering if there was any guidance or resources any of the panelists would recommend.
I know Ron wants to give some advice.
I'll defer to Ron.
Well, to get parole, that's not necessarily our bailiwick, but I think that there are organizations on record that can be of assistance. I know through usually the American Civil Liberties Union has good resources to direct on those issues, because they're very prominent on a national basis when it deals with issues of criminal justice. So while my organization doesn't directly deal with people who are doing life and seeking to get on parole, I believe that the American Civil Liberties Union could be helpful. Brandon, I really defer to you on that.
All right. Yeah, I was being respectful. So yeah, to the person who posed the question, currently, based upon current law, if your loved one is sentenced to life without parole, that is life without parole. That's their natural life. So the only way for them to be able to receive any relief or potentially be released is through the commutation process, and that is through our agency. So if you shoot me an email, it should be in the chat, and I'm sure that Reverend Michelle will provide it with you. I will walk you through the commutation process. So that is the only recourse available to him at this time, until which time that, as Brother Bobby said, the legislature acts and pass either a medical parole or a general paroling mechanism for those sentenced to life without parole.
Excellent, excellent.
May I add this?
Sure, real quick, Bobby.
Maybe it's good, or it will be helpful for Miss Yvette if individuals on here can refer her and direct her to immediate contacts who will help her, because unless the legislative changes that, none of our people inside the prison serving life in prison will be able to go up for parole. They can go up for commutation, but we need help for each one of those individuals, which has risen to 5,400 plus individuals. So maybe we can give her addresses and contacts of people that will actually help her to compile his list or his application for commutation, or move with a legislative agenda to make it available for individuals serving life.
Who are some of those individuals that could help with that?
Well, we understand that CABI is out there, the Coalition to Abolish Death by Incarceration. You have the Free the Ballot, another organization, the Abolition Law Center. You have Unincarcerated Minds. My information. You can give that to her or whatever. And I mean, but we have to do that. But we also need some of these universities to help the individuals inside of prison submitting their applications to Brandon and them. Sure, we can do it on our own, or our people, meaning when I say we can do it, but why not providing those applications all the readily available resources that will be provided to the individuals when they submit their commutation application? Why not get, certified letters to submit to the pardon board for commutation that this individual will receive employment, housing, mental health, to be reacclimated back into society. All of that is required in order to bring Miss Yvette's father home.
That sounds like an information packet that we need to put together,
Yeah.
that unincarcerated minds might be able to provide to people when they ask for this assistance. So I love that.
And wait a minute, Eric, before you move on, I want to add to that. The intention of this conversation, y'all, is that we're going to put together some recommendations. So far, what I got down, just hold in the space for 1 second, is parole board submitting names annually to the pardons board to ask, for them, these guys are doing good. Maybe they should be able to come home, right? Like Bobby said, switch that up, provide cost analysis, because money 70% ain't never going to get paid. The next thing I got down for a recommendation is allow agencies and universities to come into the jail to help the people that's trying to work on coming home, so that people that got low level reading and education will have the support they need. Another recommendation, whatever this look like, which is very near and dear to my heart, is to reform parole and sunset parole program, because I got a new love or a burden in my spirit for the reform. The people that came home, at which we call in the juvenile lifers, I think they renamed themselves. Like Ramona said, that's just got to be so taxing. And so looking at what that looked like, and maybe Secretary could support us, because I think that timing and who we know is so important, and having the secretary on a call with us, because we're so grateful for them to be able to come home. But what would it look like, and what package do we got to permit or whatever for the juvenile lifers that's home on parole on the street? Right? We want to really get into that. That is really at my heart right now, because it's like a catch-20. It's like bittersweet. We're so happy that they home, but they so stressed they can't make a move. So, like, just making some type of recommendations how to move that work forward.
No, that's Reverend Michelle. That's excellent. I please keep taking notes and track of that. And then when we get closer to the end, then we're going to read off those recommendations and those lists, because we have a couple of more questions from the audience that we want to get answered. We got those poll questions that's going directly to this document that you're talking about. We want to get the results of that. And Jennifer, is there another question from the audience?
Yes. So Stephanie Moore Wright asked, what should you do when you go in front of parole in a prison that has less to offer? What should she say? So maybe one or two panelists could answer this one.
Say it again. Ask the question again. Clarify.
What should you do when you go in front of parole that has less to offer? What should she say?
I don't know if does anybody want to take that? That's kind of worded in a little awkwardly, but just advice in terms of being in front of parole. Go ahead, Bob.
There's a number of prisons across the state of Pennsylvania that doesn't really provide you with all the programming that you need when you're going before the parole board. So in many cases, such as those of us that was incarcerated as juvenile, we wind up taking our own programs. Inside of there's programs that individuals that were serving life sentences took that we created. We created the opportunity for, awakening our manhood, which was approved by the Department of Correction to be ran by prisoners. All of that goes to your records, that goes to your files. You can take a correspondence course. So for Ms. Stephanie, I will actually inform you, please tell your loved ones, reach outside the prisons. There's a number of organizations that they can reach out to that gives them a corresponding course to better their lives, to better help them think and function once they are out here or whatever. So whatever the jail does not provide you with, we should make sure that we're sending those resources, meaning the advocacy world out here, to those individuals. So when the parole board see them, they'll see that you didn't just wait for the Department of Correction to prepare you for your reentry, but you have took the initiative and reached outside of the gates.
Okay. Okay. We're going to ask one more question before we move to the next poll. Jennifer?
So the next question is for Secretary Flood. What priorities can we address with this administration? And secondly, has the governor set aside time in his schedule to review and sign off on recommendations by BOP, thus tying up the loose ends with this streamlined process?
Right. So priorities, I mean, that's a great question. So, I mean, there's a ton of priorities, but I think if we're speaking in the context of those sentenced to life without parole, I think because we're doing a pretty good job at addressing pardons and creating these different expedited lanes, these varying levels of review, which historically we've never done. We've always looked at everyone kind of as a we looked at all applicants as a monolith when we shouldn't have been doing that. We should have been looking at especially nonviolent versus violent, sexual versus non-sexual, et cetera. So we're doing a great job with pardons, trying to create these different lanes. But when it comes to commutation, you know, as Bobby mentioned, you know, there's over 5,400 folks that have been sentenced to life without parole, and there's a considerable number, I believe, over 1,200 that are convicted of what's known as second degree, you know, murder, which means that they weren't the direct participant or weren't the principal in their case, where someone's in the commission of a felony where someone lost their life. You know, so those are cases that I consider to be low-hanging fruit, cases where certainly we talk about, does the punishment fit the crime? In many cases, a lot of victims and surviving family members of victims don't oppose these cases. These are cases where individuals have the support of the Department of Corrections and their institution. So these are the easy cases, right? Not saying that there aren't first degree murder cases that we shouldn't be prioritizing, but we understand there's a finite period here. The Lieutenant Governor and the Governor leave January of 2023. So if we're looking at things from through an efficient lens, we should be looking at cases where you have least resistance that you'll potentially encounter. So that should be the number one priority. That is somewhat, we have instituted some internal mechanisms to ensure that we at least hear as many viable cases before this administration leaves. So that's my take on the first question. And the second part of the question, you talked about us collaborating with the governor to streamline his, especially when he's required to act on these applications. Yeah, I mean, absence of any statutory mandate that says when the governor has to act, that's something that it's a process that we'll have to institute internally. And again, trying to get both the governor's office, the governor's lawyers, the Office of General Counsel to say, hey, listen, if we send you 200 cases and 80 of them and 100 of them are low-level pardon cases, you shouldn't be putting the same amount of time and energy that you put into a commutation case, right? Especially for these low-level offenses. So let's have a lower level review for these less severe cases, and then you spend more time on these commutation cases. So we do have an informal process that we're fine-tuning, but you will see those turnaround times will be much quicker and, more importantly, more uniform as we move forward.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you so much for that, Secretary Flood. I think we should do our next poll question. It's going to be a conversational one. I don't want to do them back to back yet. I want to see what kind of conversation comes out of the second poll. And then depending on that, then I'll give you the signal for the next one. So the next poll question is, what do you think is the biggest hindrance to completing parole or probation successfully? Fines and fees, difficulty of locating resources, lack of support and incentives, too stringent guidelines, or the lack of individual approach towards each parolee and probationer. And because the panelists can't actually chime in and add to the poll, I'm going to go around. I want you guys to answer this question directly. And so I want to start with Ramona. Ramona, because this kind of relates to the question I asked you last time. What do you think is the biggest hindrance to completing parole or probation successfully?
I think that because probation and parole does not take an individual approach to each person. My knowledge of probation and parole is they're supposed to be more of a support system for each individual. But all it looks like is policing to me. You see them with their parole agent jacket on, you see a gun, you see a stun gun, you see pepper spray, you see all of the works. So it's more of like a policing situation instead of helping them transition into society in a respectful fashion.
Okay.
Excellent, excellent. Bobby, what do you think is the biggest hindrance to completing parole and probation successfully?
They put all black and brown people on parole basically until we are dead. So when you say what's the biggest hindrance, the dishing out of the sentences of how long you want an individual to sit on probation is the hindrance. You can never afford an individual to have a meaningful life when they're living underneath those invisible shackles, Eric. Literally. So what we need to be looking at, how can we, and I'm going to reiterate it, we must incorporate and push with an agenda for sunsetting of individuals from up off of parole and probation.
Amen.
Individuals do not need to be. You have Reuben Jones, my co-worker. He's been on parole for the past 15 years with no infraction. Yet he still sit with those invisible shackles placed upon him, like a number of other people. So when we say moving beyond parole and probation, the Parole and Probation Board in so many ways has become the equivalent of a predator lender for black and brown people on the quality of life. The APR is too high. The interest rate is too high. How can you live a life if you're constantly under restraints when you're no longer a threat to society because something that may have occurred 20 or 30 years ago? So the biggest restraint is them implementing these sentences on probation.
Okay.
Got it.
Let me get Vince's opinion. Vince, tell me what is your theory on biggest
Well,
hindrance to completing?
I think that all five of those answers play a part, but mostly it's the probation officer himself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with I handle a lot of guys in organized crime that are on probation, federal probation. No matter what they do, probation officer's right there to violate them. I mean, within reason. I've seen people get violated. Like Ron said, he was right on point with that fine and restitution. I think you're protected under the Constitution. You can't get blood from a stone. If you take time and read the Constitution, you'll see that you can't be violated unless you're able to pay a fine. Now, Bobby's able to pay the fine. That's why they take the $30 out of his check. But if you're not able, they can't violate you. Also, association. Your associate in organized crime, if they see you with another organized crime figure, you're violated. There's good law out there that says if you're working with a person and it's a legitimate business and you're doing the right thing, you could be around a convicted felon if it's for good purposes. But yet I see a lot of people getting violated for that. I have good United States Supreme Court law on that. But I feel that the probation office and the probation department is the greatest hindrance.
Got it.
Secretary Flood, your response?
Yeah, I think what Vince said, obviously all potentially can become hindrances, but I think at the end of the day, it comes down to approach, right? Because if your approach is wrong, you won't be able to, I think it makes for a more unmanageable client on parole, and right, and parole and probation officers like to lament about the fact that they have huge caseloads, 100+ folks on their caseload, so why spend time, why not allow people that can kind of move on autopilot as opposed to, trying to micromanage. And, as someone who spent 5 years and walked 5 years off successfully on parole, I had a number of different parole officers, and the approach was everything. I had one parole officer that said I was very arrogant just because, I kind of spoke very matter-of-factly to her, and felt that I didn't need to be scrutinized at every point. But then I ended up getting a parole officer that there would be times where I literally forgot I was on parole, so, he kept his distance. And to Ramona's part, didn't pop up and kind of try to show that make those shows of force, with the vest and the gun, so for me, it worked perfectly. He knew that I had my head on a swivel and that I was doing the right thing, and he gave me the latitude that I deserved. And I think if more parole officers and probation officers do that, not only will you see more favorable outcomes, but again, it helps them because it makes for a more compliant caseload.
Excellent. Ron, anything you want to add to that?
Just briefly, I mean, obviously, I'm going to go with fines and fees. I feel like, Bob, give me door number one here. But it's the reason I say that is because it's emblematic of the overall overreaching problem in corrections and criminal justice in this country. And that's understanding the data. It fines and fees. People think that they're getting these people to pay all this money. Well, guess what? It costs nationally between $1.20 and $1.41 to collect every dollar that different states do collect for fines, fees, and costs. So in other words, if you think you've collected $20, it's really cost you more than that, $20.82 or whatever the math. I'm not good at math, but it really has cost you more money to collect the dollars than it is in terms of the effect it has on the revenues for the states. Data is poorly managed, whether it's with the parole officer to see how effective they are, whether it's with fine, fees, or costs, whether it's with sentencing. This country didn't start trying to reduce prison populations until it got too expensive. It wasn't because they were all warm and fuzzy and thought it was the right thing to do. Criminal justice reform has come about because of the cost. And that's the standpoint, I'm not talking about from the people, but from the standpoint of the policymakers and the legislators and the professionals who run it. Criminal justice cost is driving it to a point where changes are being made. So I'll leave it at that because I know our time is limited, but I go with fines and fees because it's out of control, and I follow the data. You follow the data, you have to understand that's holding more people back than violations of crime or other things.
Well, thank you for that, Ron. And I just want to say, just looking at the poll results that we have from our audience, the number one answer was lack of an individual approach towards each parolee and probation officer. So again, similar to what the secretary said, similar to what Ramona said, that if you take it on a case-by-case basis, you could actually eliminate a lot of these people, remove a lot of these people from the system because they're not violating anything. They're not a harm. And so second place answer was too stringent guidelines, very similar to basically what Bobby was saying, like the whole system is set up against us and set to fail. Ron's favorite answer, fines and fees, word, followed by difficulty of locating resources and lack of support, wrapping up the options. So thank you for answering those. And we're going to go to the next poll question. Let me see if
And Eric, while that question is coming up, I do want to ask one other question too, before we close out. I know we're getting close in. All right, so yeah, answer this. Yep, I see it.
Okay, yeah, so let's do this last poll question and then we'll go back to Reverend. The next poll question, how long do you think probation and parole should last before it becomes harmful or useless? The options are 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, or a lifetime. How long do you think probation and or parole should last before it becomes harmful or useless? I think I want to go to Vincent first. Vince, what do you think? How long should a person be on probation or parole before it becomes harmful or useless?
Well, it's a tough one because it depends on the offense. I think child molesters should be on a lifetime probation. Well, I think other people, no matter what it is, drugs or whatever, 3 years, in my opinion, would be sufficient.
Okay.
The person don't get violated in 3 years, I think he's going to make it.
Great. We're going to go to Ron next. Ron, how long do you think before it becomes harmful or useless?
Again, I'm going to agree in part with Vince. That's a very tough question because we are dealing with individuals. We're dealing with different types of crime. But again, I think that there is no real good system of evaluating that. What is the standard for it? You know, what is the standard? Why did I get I had no issues when I was locked up. When I get in front of the parole board and I was not you know, I showed no remorse, and I got hit 6 times. You know, while I was in a halfway house. So I don't know. I don't think there's a proper mechanism. There aren't proper mechanisms for really evaluating that. So I think that's what they need to do.
There you go. I think that's an important note, Reverend Michelle, to put down, and that there is no mechanism to judge. Everybody's up to the individual discrimination of the parole board or whoever you're sitting in front of. Ramona, what do you think? What's the optimal time before it becomes harmful or useless?
I think because most of the time when people are first released, they give them like a 2-year window and say that most of the time if they're going to go back, they're going to go back within the first 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And beyond that is senseless.
Mm-hmm.
Are certain circumstances where someone may need, like Vince said, that they need to be monitored through the rest of their life.
Mm-hmm.
But again, my position always is if someone has been rehabilitated enough to come home, I really don't see the purpose of parole anyway, especially if it's not going to be an asset to helping them get reacclimated into society without the bells and whistles of the policing.
Exactly. So you've served your time inside and they want you to
Right.
serve additional time outside.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what you think in terms of a reasonable length of time for probation and parole before it becomes harmful or useless.
I believe it becomes harmful and useless when we allow our individuals to return out of prison with no resources. I believe that the moment that we allow individuals to re-enter back into the community and our society with no meaningful resources to get themselves reacclimated, it's harmful. I believe that if we have these resources in place to provide them with a real meaningful opportunity, each individual will be able to make a productive stride in life to not reoffend. So when you're looking at that, I would say, you know, as we were speaking and we was lobbying, you know, over a year ago, you know, about the probation issue or whatever. Parole was taken out of that mistakenly, you know, and, you know, we have our questions about the parole bill. But after 3 years, you can make an assessment. In the psychiatry field, they say after 90 days, something becomes a pattern. So imagine if we provide our individuals that's coming out of the prison with a 90-day immediate re-entry introduction with resolve at the forefront for their reacclimation. We'll see change, and that can only magnify itself. So that is something that I think that we should be looking at. But more importantly, I must add this, and this is something that, you know, Kier Braffin and I was discussing with, you know, Salim and a couple of us from Dignity and Power. There's other avenues that we have to look at. We can go through the court process, as Vincent was, you know, stating, to be, you know, terminated. We need to amplify that. So if we're providing these individuals with the resources, they're coming home on their feet, prepared. But there never should be that opportunity to push a person on parole beyond that 3-year period, especially if we're providing them with the resources to have a meaningful life.
Yes.
Thank you. Secretary Flood, your thoughts?
Yeah, I echo everyone else's sentiments. I think there should be a tiered system in place, kind of what was, as well as caps too. So it really just depends on the nature of the offense. Obviously, you know, Vince mentioned about folks, certain sexual offenders. I think that should be kind of discretionary. Doesn't necessarily have to be lifetime, but it should be discretionary. But yeah, it definitely should be a tiered system. I think Ramona mentioned too, One stat that you'll find on the Department of Corrections website and in their report around recidivism is about 12,000 folks are released from DOC every year, and about 60% of them recidivate. And as she mentioned, they recidivate, they usually return within 2.5 years. So I think that 3-year mark is should be kind of standard, but it should obviously, there should be tiers depending upon other types of offenses.
Definitely should be balanced. Definitely should be balanced. So I'm going to end the poll now. We have the majority of folks have chimed in, and it looks like it's almost a tie between 1 year and 3 years.
Okay.
46% say 3 years, 43% say 1 year. And then we have a couple of people at 7% with 5 years, and then another individual of 4% says lifetime. So almost 90%, 89% of folks believe between 1 and 3 years is the ideal time. All right, let's, Justin, did you get it? Did you share the results already? Because I popped that back up on my screen.
Yes, he did.
Okay. And I think that was the first question we did. All right. Reverend Michelle, I think you had a question before we started the last poll. Do you want to ask a question now?
You know what? I just want to do a time check. It's 7:30, and we are scheduled to end at 7:30. So we want to stop and thank everybody for jumping in. I think we've had a great conversation. We got a lot of takeaways. We got a lot of next steps. I did have another question, but I think what I want to do, and it was about COVID. It was to the secretary and what is the climate around pardons right now with COVID and getting people out of jail. And that, you know, is there any expedition there or expediting? But before you answer that, for the people that want to jump off, thank you so much for coming. We have your email because you registered. We are going to have this report out by the end of May. And so if you have any more feedback or recommendations or whatever, please email them to Why Not Prosper. Go on that link in that website so we can have a nice compiled report to give to the Department of Corrections, parole, probation in the city. So thank you. Don't everybody start leaving right away because I said that. Secretary, I guess I would ask you real quick, is there some work going around COVID? I think that's real important. We can't leave that without asking about that.
So before you answer that, Secretary, I thank you, Reverend Michelle, for that. I know we want to be mindful of folks' times. If you can stay on, we did have a few more questions, and that was one of those questions. For the panelists, just a show of hands. If you have to leave, raise your hand. If not, I'm just going to go through. Vince, you said you have to leave?
Yeah, but I'd like to add something.
Mm-hmm.
If I could help anyone, don't hesitate to contact me. I'm not looking, I don't get paid for this. I do it to try to bring some justice into this system. Reverend Michelle has my number and she can get in touch with me. If I could help anyone, just let me know.
I appreciate you, Vincent. Thank you.
Stay well, Rev.
Thank you.
All right, you got it, Vince. Thank you.
All right, Secretary Flood, the question was, what is the climate on the Board of Pardons regarding COVID-19 release and pardons?
All right, so at least as it relates to our functions here, we don't have any formalized process or initiative in place that's COVID specific. However, what I have told Secretary Wetzel several times and will say again publicly, and I've said this publicly, we will happily, the Board of Pardons will happily schedule applicants for commutation, will expedite the scheduling of their applications for medical reasons. It can be very generic or it can be COVID specific, but it has to come from Secretary Wetzel. So Secretary Wetzel says, hey, I have 5 applicants that I think there's a medical necessity for, whether it's COVID or not. We will stop what we're doing here at the Board of Pardons and we'll do what we need to do in order to schedule them immediately. So, but that has to come from Secretary Wetzel, right? Because they have the medical records of these applicants, so they can substantiate that, because my board, I can schedule them all day, but my board's going to want to be able to see me, will want some kind of medical documentation to substantiate that here's why we're expediting. So again, I would again, allow the board, Department of Corrections. All it takes is an ask for them, and how it works. And the reason why I say, and I'm not just punting it to them, the way it works is we prepare what's known as analysis sheets for every applicant for commutation or a pardon. And essentially that's what the board is using to drive their decision making. There's a comprehensive report, but what we do is we distill a lot of the more significant factors from that report and put it in analysis form. So unless we get the report from DOC, we can't prepare that analysis. And if I can't prepare that analysis, then we can't schedule those hearings. So the sooner we get those reports from Secretary Wetzel, the sooner we can expedite those cases. So yeah, there isn't a formal process in place, COVID specific, but again, we would happily drop what we're doing to prioritize that subset of the commutation, the folks that are in the queue for commutation.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Brother
Thank you.
Eric, may I add this to go along with that? Michelle, you think that we can actually send out a questionnaire form inside the penitentiary to the individuals that's up in there with chronic, pre-existing conditions that require one of those compassionate reliefs submitted up inside the penitentiary? Like, I think we should do an outreach inside of the prison to find out and see what organizations will help us, because the language in there is very critical for the Department of Correction to send it to Brandon and know.
Yeah, so what I heard Secretary saying is that they will listen to him. So we really have to outreach and get to Secretary Wetzel and tell him that we understand that some stuff could be expedited if you put your hands on it and send it on over. So we could start the outreach, absolutely, and then it's got to come from Secretary Wetzel.
Yeah.
And the list got to be compiled. So so that's where we got to see what his temperature is.
Okay. Okay, we got just about 3 questions left, and I want to get through them because 2 of them actually come from the folks who are still hanging on with us and having this conversation. So one of the questions is, what if you don't have a job? Should you wait to get a job first, or do they have a waiver of court fees until you do get a job? So this relates to the conversation we talked about earlier about that $30 that you're paying and any of the other fees. What if you don't have a job? Should you wait until you get a job, or do they have a waiver of court fees until you do get a job? And this is open to anyone.
Well, one of the things probation and parole is going to want to see, or I guess if you're talking about the county, if you're talking about getting fees waived, is if you're not having a job is because just the austerity of the job market, or if you're disabled, you can't physically work. So, and usually what they determine someone as being indigent and being unable to pay is if obviously you're not getting any income, but they're going to want to know why it is that you can't get a job. So whether that's through disability, which is whether, again, just a crappy job market. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you can initiate that at any point in time, whether before you get a job or not, but you're going to have to answer that question as to why and provide a compelling reason, right? So you can't just say, hey, I went on 2 interviews and they didn't hire me, so I'm not going to be able to pay this. They may want something more compelling than that, but just be prepared to answer that question either way.
Mm-hmm.
And what if you do? And so once you do answer that question, then what is available to you? Is there a waiver? Is there some type of postponement of fines and fees? Does it accumulate?
Right. So the courts, the district attorney, the clerk of courts, they have the discretion to waive that, especially the district attorney, president, judge, and the clerk of courts. That's something that all 3 will be consulted on, but the district attorney can drive that conversation. I think that's what Ron talked about, Larry Krasner being able to unilaterally do away with those fines and costs. But unfortunately, not every county is progressive as Philadelphia. So you have a lot of counties that wouldn't be willing to do that in a wholesale manner, but may be willing to do it on a case-by-case basis. Or as I said earlier, say, hey, listen, while we may not waive the fee, the fines and costs, we're willing to put in black and white, we still support this person's application for commutation or a pardon. So it doesn't allow those fees to impair anything. But yeah, those 3 entities can very much well waive those fees: clerk of courts, DA, and the president, judge in the county.
Okay. 2 questions we have. One specific to Bobby and Ramona. What would you like to see happen with the relaxation of this system of lifetime reporting? What about fines and costs? What would you like to see in relation to this system of lifetime reporting? So, excuse me. What would you like to see happen with the relaxation of this system of lifetime reporting? I'm not sure if you get the question. Does that make sense to you?
What would I like to see happen with the relaxing of the
Relaxation of the system of lifetime reporting. So basically doing away with this entire lifelong, process of being on parole.
Okay, I got that. I can address that. I will say this. It was ruled in 2012 that from the legislative, once they passed a law about having parole eligibility for minors, juveniles that were sentenced to die in prison with life sentence, it was ruled that there will be parole eligibility for individuals, but for any individuals prior to the legislative implementing this new law, parole eligibility for juvenile lifers, it was not to be applicable to any of them. I am one of them. 500 individuals across the state of Pennsylvania fell into the category of them not being eligible. However, our Pennsylvania Supreme Court wound up giving the courts around Philadelphia, which was actually led by Philadelphia, to make it applicable, although it is ruled illegal. So the sentence that I am currently under, a lifetime without a lifetime of parole, is an illegal sentence. And since it's an illegal sentence, I'm not supposed to be underneath it. However, every last one of us that was sentenced to die in the penitentiary took and accepted parole with the life tail because we wanted to get out of prison, although it is illegal. Let's be clear. Lifetime parole for all of those before 2012 from the legislature said it was not applicable to any of us.
Okay.
But you had the courts allow the lower courts, to resentence us to an illegal sentence. So what should be done in the relaxation? It should be removed because it has already been ruled that it was an unconstitutional sentence.
Gotcha. Ramona, I don't want to speak for you, but feel free to just say ditto if you want, because we run.
Ditto, I agree.
All right, great. Again, I really want to be respectful of time, but I know there's folks that still waiting around to ask questions. And so one of the last questions, let me go to my last question. What other agencies or activists do you know of that are dealing with probation and trying to get people off in a timely way? So this is your opportunity to list resources, organizations, people that you know, emails, phone numbers, websites, and just give it to the folks before we ask this last question and call it a night. And anyway, Ron, I know you've been quiet for a little bit, and I know you're in the dark a little bit. We know you're still there.
Yes, I'm here.
Leave right alone.
Ron, tell us a little bit about maybe your organization or and others who might be working on this.
Well, we don't we want to stay mission centric on this, and that is dealing with the fines and the fees and the costs. So, boy, there's so much to attack and to try to support and create advocacy about, but we're going to try to stay in our lane in that regard and do what we do with respect to the fines, fees, and costs. However, again, I think I read a paper about pardons and public safety, and the organization is Pennsylvania Lawyers for Social Equity. They're a very good organization. I would look at that as a resource. Pennsylvania Lawyers for Social Equity. They did an extensive study on pardons, and their data. They're focused on data to deal with things, and I think that's. I look at all these issues. And I really see the mining of data and the application of data to the policy is key. So that's the only organization that I know is got the resources and the economists and the people who have those skills that can go at that issue to try to deal with it, not on an individual basis, but as a matter of overall policy.
Okay. All right. Well, and also while we're sharing these resources, if you yourself can put them in the chat so people can get a hold of them, or if we're going to be taking notes as well, and they're going to go into our list of resources. Ramona, any resources or organizations that you like to tell us about or tell the listeners about that can actually are out here working and address this issue?
I know of a number of organizations. They address various issues. I know Reverend Michelle, Why Not Prosper? This is the first organization that I know of that's actually compiling data, trying to get people together to present to elected officials about probation and parole. I always say unincarcerated minds, we do our share of work, but we haven't been actually focused on probation and parole until Bobby had his actual situation go down. But other organizations, I'm not really sure. Like I said, I don't want to undermine their work.
No, that's okay.
Things, but I haven't heard of anyone actually focusing on probation and parole.
That's okay. And so what we'll ask you to do is just put your contact information for Unincarcerated Minds in the chat. Everybody knows how to reach Why Not Prosper. If you're here, you know how to reach them. Secretary Flood, any resources that you, organizations, activists, individuals that you want to share with the people?
I think the representatives of the organizations that served as panelists obviously are the first place for us to start. So with Bobby, the work he's doing, and even if it's not specific to probation and parole, I'm certain that he, as well as his wife, would be willing to expand that to include that as an agenda item. As Ron mentioned, Pulse, Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity, we work very closely with them. The Economy League of Greater Philadelphia is the one of the partners that helped to commission that study that Ron referenced. There's tons of them. The one thing I would say is that maybe they can resuscitate the Reform Alliance. They kind of died over the last couple of years. I know that was the work that they initially were dealing with Meek Mill. Maybe Meek Mill, I don't know where he at, but no, I can say for Board of Pardons, certainly. One thing, I'm certainly making the most of my platform and bully pulpit and challenging parole to, as Bobby said, to initiate these things themselves, right? That you don't have to wait to be prompted about it. But you guys have success stories that are on your caseloads. Why not and further incentivize, and then why not let folks that are on parole know that, hey, the next natural track of serving on parole is that you will be able to not only be released from parole, but also be able to potentially have your record removed as well. So definitely all organizations that are on this call and any that you're affiliated with, please know that you have an ally with the Board of Pardons. So yeah, tons of folks and I don't want to leave anyone out, but we're willing to work with everyone.
No, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Bobby, I know you've got a whole laundry list you can run off, but just give us 2 or 3 off the top of your head.
Dignity and power.
Dignity and power.
You have Dignity and Power. I'm going to also mention the Abolition Law Center, Robert Hope Saline. You asked for 2, but I have to give you 3. And the ACLU Philadelphia chapter. Let's be clear with that. That's Nisa and Sarah. That's pushing that, and Elizabeth. Liz. So, I'm giving you 3 that's pushing, and you're about to see the launch of the campaign titled Enough when it comes to the parole and probation. Okay. That is unfolding as we speak.
Okay. All right. Well, a lot of people looking forward to it. So I know we had one last question, and the last poll that we want to ask you is, are you going home with new information, insights, or awareness? Are you going home with new information, insights, or awareness? And I will tell you, unlike the other poll questions, there is a wrong answer for this one, because everybody should be answering yes at this point. I don't care how knowledgeable you were. There's so much information that was shared here, so many detailed and specific things. From all aspects. Again, I particularly want to thank the folks who are sticking along with us and watching and
Yes.
listening to the conversation, because some of the things that you've put in the chat, not only some great questions, but also examples of situations of people with lived experience dealing with the system, and also some really heartwarming, heart-touching accounts of how the system has impacted you as well. So I would encourage you to, again, reach out to Reverend Michelle and the folks at Why Not Prosper to share your stories and to ask your questions. If there's anything that we haven't touched on tonight, if there's anything that we forgot to mention, if there's some aspect, I know early on in our conversation, there's folks who, you know, wanted to chime in and wanted to add to the discussion. Hopefully we touched on what you wanted to touch on, but if not, feel free to reach out to Reverend Michelle and Why Not Prosper as an organization. And I'm sure that you'll find that they'll be open and receptive to what you have to ask and what you need to know. Okay. So I'm going to end the poll now because, again, right now we have 100% of participants who said they are going home with new information, insights, awareness. And I think that's what matters the most. That's how we can tell this is an effective opportunity to communicate these needs. I want to say thank you. Thank you to Reverend Michelle. Thank you to Justin and Jennifer for your technical support. And just as equally, I want to thank Ramona, Bobby, Ron, Secretary Flood, and
everybody,
and everyone who got a chance to be here and to participate. Really, thank you so much. Reverend Michelle, would you like to close us out?
Again, I just did what Eric said. Thank you, everybody. I feel sad. I just want to keep talking because so much, you know, and I'm really an action type woman. You know, we could talk till we turn blue, but I like to see the wheels turning. And so I wrote down a couple steps. Bobby, I'm looking forward to sitting next to you with the Enough campaign. So pull up a seat for me. Okay. And some of the next steps is just writing up some of those sunset laws you're talking about. And I'm sure Enough probably will handle that. And then finding a champion, some elected officials is what I hear we need to do. So once we write it, we could pop it in their laps. We need to get the Wetzel and write up and ask him to support us and get a list of those people that could, you know, Brandon said he'll easily put on the table in front of the board. Praise the Lord. So I got that down on the list, and just collecting and continue to educate ourselves is what I'm hearing. Ben said that there's a lot of laws and stuff that because of lack of knowledge, we don't know them. And so we can't tell the courts about them and, you know, and implement them for ourselves and our family. So I have that down as a takeaway. I just got some steps like what this sunset reform going to look like. So I'm excited. Again, thank y'all all for being here. Again, I probably could talk a long time because I am just near and dear. I am actually I'm actually just loving the fact that like the time is now, right? You know, it never was a time like this, y'all, and we could really create what we want for ourselves and our lives. And we got so much power, right? And so I just feel like this is a time we capitalize, want to get together, galvanize, unify, and just demand what we want. We did it the other day up at Harrisburg with Dignity Empowerment Now, and we're going to continue to do that. So I just thank everybody who joined in this conversation. You know, just keep looking out for us. We're going to keep on talking about it, and we're going to keep on making strides. And so I'm so grateful. Eric, thank you for your excellent
talking.
Think of the word. What did you do? A moderation. Hallelujah. Right? Thank you so much. Thank you for everybody. I can't thank you guys enough.
Well, we got our march. You heard it directly from Reverend Michelle. We all got our marching orders. She want to see them wheels turning. So again, I want to find out what you guys are up to. Be sure to contact Why Not Prosper, the other organizations that are listed. Again, if you need any additional information, reach out to Why Not Prosper. Again, I've been your host, Eric Marr Sr., and it's been my honor to sit here before you guys and moderate this conversation. So thank you all.
Nice job, Eric.
Have a great night. Thank you.
Yeah, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank y'all. Good night.
Everyone have a good evening.
Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome. Glad everything went well.
Excellent.
Oh, shit. Oh, God.
I see folks trying to learn how to log off, and folks
Thank you, Eric.
hanging around waiting to see what else we'll get in. I'm like you, Reverend Michelle. You know, I can be here all night, and just for transparency's sake, I know we're still on Facebook. I'm so glad we're on Facebook, as a matter of fact, because I want to go back and watch this and get some of the information that was shared, and be able to share with